The year was 2247, and humanity had finally done what generations had dreamed about. They had built ships that could travel faster than light. They had spread across dozens of star systems. And now, they had received something that made every person on Earth hold their breath with excitement. An invitation to join the Galactic Council. Ambassador Grace. Mitchell stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Horizon's Edge as it approached the council station. She was a woman of 53 years, with gray streaks in her dark hair and eyes that had seen both the best and worst of human nature. Behind her stood her team of diplomats, scientists, and military advisors. Among them was a young man named Danny Ortega, who served as her personal aide and had worked his entire adult life for this moment. The council station was unlike anything humans had ever built. It was a massive sphere of crystalline light, orbiting a dead star that pulsed with strange energies. The station was home to representatives from 847 different species, all of them part of a government that had existed for over 12,000 years. 12,000 years of peace, of cooperation, of advancement. And now, humanity wanted to be part of it. Ambassador, Danny said quietly, the docking sequence is complete. They are ready to receive us. Grace took a deep breath and nodded. Then let us make history. The walk from the docking bay to the council chamber took nearly an hour. The station was enormous, filled with corridors that seemed to shift and change, gravity that pulled in different directions, an air that carried the sense of 1,000 different worlds. Grace saw species that walked on two legs, species that floated through the air, species that seemed to be made of pure light, and species that looked like nothing more than moving shadows. Finally, they reached the chamber itself. It was a vast sphere, with platforms arranged in a spiral pattern that rose toward a glowing center. Each platform held representatives from a different species, and all of them turned to look as the human delegation entered. Grace felt very small in that moment, very young, very alone, but she walked forward anyway. The platform reserved for new species was at the very bottom of the chamber. It's the lowest position possible. Grace climbed onto it with her team and looked up at the assembled representatives of the galaxy. "Welcome, humans," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The translation device in Grace's ear converted the alien sounds into English, though it could not hide the tone of boredom in the speaker's voice. "I am High Arbiter Zorvax of the Valkyrie. I have held this position for 300 of your years. State your purpose." Grace looked up at the Valkyrie representative. Zorvax was tall, nearly 3 meters in height. With a body that resembled an insect from Earth, he had compound eyes that reflected the light of the chamber, in 1,000 different colors, and mandibles that clicked together as he spoke. He sat on the highest platform, looking down at the humans like a teacher watching children play. "High Arbiter," Grace said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I am Ambassador Grace Mitchell of the United Earth Government. We have come to formally request membership in the Galactic Council. We wish to join your community, to share in your knowledge, and to offer what knowledge we have in return." For a moment, there was silence. Then, from somewhere high above, came a sound that Grace did not immediately recognize. It was a clicking, grinding, whooshing noise that rose and fell in waves. It took her several seconds to understand what she was hearing. Laughter. The council was laughing at them. "Membership," said Zorvax, his mandibles clicking in what the translator rendered as amusement. "You wish to join us as equals? A species that discovered faster-than-light travel merely 70 years ago. A species that still fights wars among itself. A species that has not even unified its own planet." Grace felt Danny stiffen beside her, but she kept her composure. "We understand that we are young compared to most council species. We do not claim to be their equals in experience or knowledge. We seek only the opportunity to learn and to contribute what we can." "Contribute." The voice came from another platform, where a being that seemed to be made of living stone sat unmoving. This was Representative Thelix of the Morvani, a species so old that they had watched stars die and be reborn. "What could your primitive civilization possibly offer to us? Your ships are barely functional by our standards. Your weapons are toys. Your understanding of basic physics is incomplete. Your medical science is primitive. Your art is childish. Your philosophy is naive. Another voice joined in, this one from a floating sphere of gas that glowed purple and gold. The Dreth have observed your species for some time. You are violent, emotional, and unpredictable. You make decisions based on feeling rather than logic. You value individual desires over collective good. These are not the traits of a civilized species. More laughter echoed through the chamber. Grace felt her face grow hot, but she did not respond with anger. She had been prepared for this. The briefings from Earth had warned her. The Council species viewed younger civilizations with contempt. She had been told to remain calm. To show that humanity was mature enough to handle criticism, we acknowledge our flaws, she said carefully. We do not claim to be perfect. But we have come far in a short time, and we believe that with guidance, we can become worthy partners in this community. High Arbiter Zorvax leaned forward, his compound eyes fixing on Grace with an intensity that made her want to step back. Worthy partners? Little human, the Valkyrie had achieved faster than light travel when your ancestors were still living in caves. The Morvani were building empires when the first life on your planet was learning to crawl onto land. The Dreth were composing symphonies of thought when your species did not yet exist. You are children. Less than children. You are infants who have just learned to walk, and you come before us, asking to run with the adults. He sat back, his mandibles clicking in a rhythm that the translator could not quite capture. We shall grant you provisional observer status. You may attend council sessions, though you may not speak unless spoken to. You may not vote. You may not participate in technology sharing agreements. You may not access the council's archives or databases. In perhaps 1,000 years, if your species has not destroyed itself through war or foolishness, we may reconsider your application for full membership. Grace wanted to argue. She wanted to point out that humanity had achieved in 2 centuries what many species had taken millennia to accomplish. She wanted to remind them that human creativity and determination had brought them across the stars despite every obstacle. She wanted to demand the respect that her people deserved, but she did not. Instead, she bowed her head slightly and said, "We accept your generous offer, High Arbiter. We are grateful for the opportunity to observe and learn." As she led her delegation out of the chamber, Danny walked close beside her. "Ambassador," he whispered, "that was humiliating. They treated us like we were nothing." Grace did not slow her pace, but something hard and cold had settled in her chest. Something that would stay there for the rest of her life. "Yes," she said quietly. "They did. And someday, Danny, they will regret it. Mark my words. Someday they will understand exactly what humanity is capable of." She transmitted her report to Earth that night, along with a personal message to the World Council. The message was simple. Humanity would prove them wrong. No matter how long it took, no matter what they had to do. They would make the galaxy see them as equals, or they would make the galaxy fear them. Either way, they would never be laughed at again. 30 years passed, and nothing changed. Admiral Kevin Soto stood at the observation window of the Mars Defense Station, watching Earth rise over the red horizon. He was 61 years old, a career military officer who had spent his entire adult life building humanity's fleet. His hair had gone gray, his face had grown lined with worry, and his patience had worn thin. Behind him, Captain Maria Vasquez pulled up another report on the holographic display. She was his second in command, a brilliant tactician who had graduated at the top of her class. She was also tired. Tired of reading reports about how the Council had dismissed humanity again? Tired of watching their best efforts get ignored? The Council rejected our proposal for a joint research station, she said flatly. They said our scientific methods are too primitive to contribute anything useful. Kevin did not turn from the window. What about the trade agreement with the Korathi? Blocked. The Valkyrie claimed that the Korathi had already signed an exclusive trade pact with Council-approved species only. Humanity does not qualify. And the application to join the Mutual Defense Treaty? Maria hesitated. He nodded. High Arbiter Zorvax said that allowing humans into the treaty would lower the overall quality of the alliance. He suggested that we hire Dreth mercenaries if we ever face a threat we cannot handle alone. Kevin closed his eyes and took a slow breath. 30 years. 30 years of attending council sessions where human representatives were forced to sit in the back. 30 years of proposing ideas that were dismissed without consideration. 30 years of watching other species receive the respect and resources that humanity was denied. The Dreth were given full membership after only 200 years of spaceflight, Maria continued. Pulling up historical records, the Valkyrie themselves took a mere century to gain full acceptance. The Morvani were founding members, so that does not count. But even the Korathi, who achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years before us, were granted provisional membership with voting rights within their first decade, because they had something the council wanted, Kevin said quietly. The Korathi discovered a new type of energy crystal. The Dreth developed a method of predicting solar storms. Everyone who gets accepted quickly has something to trade, something that makes them valuable. Then we need to find what makes us valuable, Maria said. There must be something. Kevin finally turned from the window. His eyes were hard. We have tried, Maria. We have tried everything. When our scientists developed the new shield harmonics, the council claimed it was just a copy of Morvani research from 8,000 years ago. It was not. Our approach was completely different. But they would not even look at the details. He walked to the display and pulled up another file. When our diplomats helped negotiate peace between the Thorax and the Vendi, the council took credit for the settlement. They said our representatives were merely following instructions from Valkyrie advisors. That was a lie. Ambassador Grant handled those negotiations alone, and she did it brilliantly. Another file appeared. When our medical researchers developed a cure for the Crimson Plague that was killing millions on 3 border worlds, the council questioned whether human science was reliable enough to trust. They delayed approval for 6 months, while their own researchers verified our work. By then, another 2 million people had died. Maria stared at the display, her jaw tight. Why do they hate us so much? They do not hate us, Kevin said bitterly. They simply do not care about us. We are nothing to them. A minor species on the edge of explored space, they have been running the galaxy for 12,000 years. They have seen hundreds of young civilizations rise and fall. To them, we are just another flash of noise that will probably destroy ourselves before we ever matter. The door opened, and a communications officer hurried in. Admiral Ambassador Grant is requesting an immediate conference. She says it is urgent. Kevin and Maria exchanged glances, then activated the communication system. Ambassador Leela Grant appeared on the screen. She had succeeded Grace Mitchell 10 years ago. She had spent every day since then fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy. Her face was usually calm and composed. Today it was not. Admiral, she said without greeting, I have just received word from the council. The Vorith Collective has been granted provisional membership with limited voting rights. Kevin felt the blood drain from his face. The Vorith. The pirates? The slavers? The species that spent the last 3 centuries raiding colonies and capturing prisoners to sell on the black market? The very same, Lila confirmed. They underwent a reform process over the past 50 years. They abolished slavery, returned most of their prisoners, and agreed to follow council laws. The High Arbiter just announced that they have demonstrated sufficient civilized behavior to warrant provisional acceptance. Maria was shaking her head in disbelief. 50 years. They were raiders and murderers for 300 years, and they get accepted after 50 years of good behavior. We have been trying for 30 years without ever hurting anyone, and we are still treated like children. I requested a private meeting with High Arbiter Zorvax, Lila continued. I asked him directly what humanity must do to earn the council's respect. Do you know what he told me? Kevin waited, his hands clenched at his sides. He said that perhaps in another millennium, when our emotional attachments to concepts like freedom and individualism have matured into proper civilization, they will revisit our application. He said we should be grateful that they allow us to observe it all. He said that humans are useful as entertainment because our struggles and passions remind the elder species of their own primitive past. The room was silent. Kevin could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. They think we are entertainment. Lila's expression hardened. I am returning to Earth tonight. I have already contacted the World Council and requested an emergency session. Admiral, I believe we need to have a very serious conversation about humanity's future with the Galactic Council. Kevin nodded slowly. I will be there. The communication ended, and Kevin turned back to the window. Mars stretched out below him, red and harsh and unforgiving. Humanity had tamed that world. They had built cities in the sand, gardens in the craters, oceans in ancient canyons. They had done the impossible over and over again because that was what humans did, and the galaxy laughed at them for it. Maria, he said quietly, begin a full assessment of our military capabilities. I want to know exactly where we stand if we had to defend ourselves without Council support. Admiral, are you suggesting that we might need to fight the Council? Kevin shook his head. No. I am suggesting that we might need to survive without them. One way or another, I think things are about to change. Well, he was right. But even he did not know how much. The announcement came without warning. Every species in the Galactic Council had gathered for what they thought was a routine session. The Velkari sat on their high platforms, their compound eyes watching the lower species with the same bored superiority they had shown for millennia. The Morvani sat like mountains of living stone, patient and eternal. The Dreth floated in their spheres, shifting through colors that reflected their emotional states. Hundreds of other species filled the chamber, talking and arguing and making deals as they always did. Then the human delegation entered. And something was different. Ambassador Leela Grant walked at the front of the group. She wore the formal black uniform of Earth's diplomatic service. But her posture was not the careful, humble stance she had shown for the past decade. Her shoulders were straight. Her chin was raised. Her eyes were clear and calm. Behind her came Admiral Kevin Soto in full military dress, his chest covered with medals earned in service to Earth. Beside him walked representatives from every nation on the planet. Leaders of industry and science and art, all of them moving with the same quiet confidence. The chamber fell silent as they approached the human platform. But instead of climbing onto it, Lila stopped at the base and turned to face the council. Hi, Arbiter Zorvax, she said, her voice carrying through the translation systems to every corner of the chamber. I request permission to address the council. Zorvax's mandibles clicked with surprise. Humans did not usually request speaking time. They were observers, after all. They had no right to speak unless spoken to. But something about Leela's manner made him curious. Permission granted, Ambassador. What does humanity wish to say? Lila took a breath. Around the chamber, representatives of 847 species leaned forward, expecting another humble request for acceptance, another plea for recognition, another display of the desperation that had amused them for 70 years. They did not get what they expected. After 70 years of faithful participation as observers, Leela began. Humanity has reached a decision regarding our relationship with the Galactic Council. She paused, letting the silence build. We came to you with open hearts and hopeful minds. We offered our friendship, our knowledge, our willingness to learn and grow alongside your great civilizations. We asked only for the chance to prove ourselves worthy of partnership. Her voice grew harder. In return, we received mockery, dismissal, contempt. Our scientific achievements were stolen or denied. Our diplomatic successes were claimed by others. Our offers of cooperation were rejected without consideration. We were told that we were primitive, emotional, childish, and unworthy of respect. Murmurs began to spread through the chamber. This was not the tone they were used to hearing from humans. We accepted this treatment, Lila continued. We told ourselves that patience would bring reward. We believed that if we worked hard enough, proved ourselves enough times, showed enough dedication, you would eventually see us as equals. She shook her head slowly. We were wrong. The murmurs grew louder. Zorvax raised his forelimbs for silence, but his eyes had narrowed with something that might have been concern. Effective immediately, Lila announced. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council. Chamber erupted. Species shouted and clicked and hummed with shock. No one had ever voluntarily left the council. In 12,000 years of existence, not a single civilization had chosen to walk away from the greatest governing body the galaxy had ever known. We renounce our observer status, Lila continued over the noise. We will no longer attend council sessions, participate in joint initiatives, or recognize council authority over human space. The territory we have claimed in the Orion Spur, settled through our own exploration and labor without any assistance from the council, will be governed solely by human law. Zorvax rose from his platform, his tall form towering over the chamber. This is madness, he declared. You cannot simply leave. The council represents galactic civilization. To reject it is to reject civilization itself. No, Lila replied calmly. It is to reject your civilization. We will build our own. Representative Thilix of the Morvani spoke, his voice like grinding stones. You will isolate yourselves from the accumulated knowledge of 12,000 years. You will cut yourselves off from trade routes that sustain half the explored galaxy. You will stand alone against threats that have destroyed species far older and stronger than yours. Perhaps Lila acknowledged. Or perhaps we will discover that isolation breeds innovation. Perhaps we will find that standing alone builds strength. Perhaps we will learn that we never needed you as much as you wanted us to believe. A Dreth representative drifted forward, its gaseous form pulsing with agitation. This is the emotional response of a primitive species. You are acting out of wounded pride rather than rational analysis. In a few decades, when your technology stagnates and your economy crumbles, you will return begging for readmission. Admiral Kevin Soto stepped forward to stand beside Lila. His voice was steady and strong. The Dreth may be right. Perhaps we will fail. Perhaps our civilization will collapse, and humanity will become just another cautionary tale that elder species tell their children. But I would rather fail on our own terms than succeed as your pets. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every species that had ever laughed at human representatives. You have treated us as inferior beings since the day we arrived. You have stolen our work, dismissed our achievements, and denied us basic respect. You have made it clear that no matter what we accomplish, no matter how hard we work, no matter what we sacrifice, we will never be your equals. His voice grew cold. So we will stop trying to be your equals. We will be something else instead. Something separate. Something that owes you nothing and expects nothing from you in return. Zorvax clicked his mandibles in what might have been frustration or anger. You will regret this decision. Humanity is nothing without the Council's protection. The galaxy is vast and dangerous, and you are small and weak and alone. Lila smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had made peace with a difficult decision and no longer cared what others thought about it. Perhaps, she said, but at least we will be free. She turned and began walking toward the exit. Admiral Soto fell into step beside her, followed by the rest of the human delegation. They moved in perfect formation, their footsteps echoing through the suddenly quiet chamber. You are making the greatest mistake in your species' history, Zorvax called after them. In 1,000 years, you will be forgotten. A footnote in Galactic Records. Nothing more. Lila paused at the doorway and looked back over her shoulder. We will remember this moment, High Arbiter. Every human who ever lives will know what happened here today. And when your council comes to us for help, and they will, we will remember how you treated us when we came to you. Then she walked through the door, and the human delegation followed her, and for the first time in 70 years, the council chamber was empty of human presence. Behind them, after a moment of shocked silence, the laughter resumed. It was louder than ever, more mocking than ever, filled with the contempt of species who could not imagine that these young, foolish, emotional creatures had made anything other than a catastrophic mistake. But in the corridors of the station, where no one could hear them, the human delegation did not seem worried. They walked with their heads high in their steps, sure, moving toward their ship and their future. Whatever came next, they would face it alone, and somehow that felt better than staying. 100 years passed, and the galaxy forgot about humanity. The Galactic Council continued as it always had. The Velkari maintained their grip on power, The Morvani offered their slow, patient wisdom. The Dreth drifted through political currents, changing colors and opinions with equal ease. New species were accepted, old species faded away, borders shifted by small amounts, and the great machine of galactic civilization ground forward at its ancient, steady pace. No council ship had entered human space since the withdrawal. The quarantine was complete and absolute. Human territory was marked on star maps as a gray zone, unexplored and unimportant. A region where a young species was slowly dying alone in the dark, at least. That was what the council believed. Director Carla Santos stood in the observation deck of Unity Station, the largest structure humanity had ever built. It hung in orbit around Earth like a second moon, a ring of metal and light that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Through the transparent walls of the observation deck, she could see the fleet. 300 warships moved through the void in perfect formation. They were sleek and beautiful, designed with curves and angles that no council species had ever seen. Their hulls were made from materials that human scientists had invented in secret laboratories. Their engines burned with energies that council physics said were impossible. Their weapons could crack planets. And this was only one fleet. Humanity had 12. The maneuvers are complete, Director reported Commander Steve Burke from the tactical station. He was young, only 32 years old, part of a generation that had grown up knowing nothing but human independence. All ships performed at 103% of projected efficiency. Carla nodded, but her attention was on the ships. Each one represented decades of work, centuries of accumulated knowledge, and the combined effort of billions of people. When humanity had walked away from the council, they had known that they would need to develop their own technology. They had known that they would start from far behind. What they had not known was how quickly they would catch up. Dr. Nathan Ross entered the observation deck, his white coat marked with the symbols of the Advanced Research Division. He was 67 years old, one of the few people still alive who remembered the day humanity left the council. His grandfather had been on the original delegation that visited the council chamber, and his family had dedicated themselves to proving the council wrong. The phase shield tests were successful, Nathan reported. 93% improvement over our previous generation. At this rate, our defensive systems will be twice as effective as anything the council has within another decade. And the communication network? Carla asked. Nathan smiled. This was his greatest achievement, the project he had spent his entire career developing. Complete. Every human colony, every outpost, every ship, every station, instant communication across any distance. No delay, no interference, no possibility of interception. The council used quantum entanglement for their fastest communications, which still had limitations based on distance and interference. Human scientists had found something better, something that worked differently at a fundamental level, something that the council's 12,000 years of accumulated knowledge had never discovered because the council had stopped looking. They believed they had found all the answers. They believed that their science was complete, their understanding perfect. Their civilization, the final form that intelligent life could take, humanity had no such limitations. Humanity was still hungry, still curious, still driven by the need to prove themselves that had burned in human hearts since the day they were laughed at in the council chamber. "Show me the colonies," Carla said. The observation deck's display shifted, showing a map of human space. What had once been a small collection of systems in the Orion Spur had grown into something vast. 200 worlds, each one settled and developed according to human values. Cities that stretched across continents. Farms that fed billions. Factories that built ships and tools and dreams. And on dozens of those worlds, there were people who were not human. The refugee count has reached 12 million, Nathan noted. Species the council abandoned or forgot. Species that were conquered and had nowhere else to go. They came to us because we were the only ones who would take them. Carla thought about that. The council called itself the Guardian of Galactic Civilization. But it was very selective about which civilizations it guarded. Species that were useful were protected. Species that had something to trade were welcomed. Species that were weak or strange or simply unlucky were left to fend for themselves. Humanity had taken them in. Not because humans were saints, but because humans remembered what it felt like to be dismissed and ignored. They had built something different in their century of isolation. Something that valued determination over age, innovation over tradition, and compassion over convenience. Director Steve Burke said suddenly, his voice sharp with tension, "We are receiving a signal from the border monitoring stations. Council ships have been detected approaching the neutral zone." Carla frowned. In 100 years, no Council ship had come anywhere near human space. How many? A lot. Steve's fingers flew over the controls, pulling up sensor data. At least 500 warships. Valkyrie design, but there are others mixed in. Dreth Morvani, Korathi. He paused, his face going pale. And Vorith. The former pirates and slavers who had been granted Council membership the same year humanity left. The species that had proved the Council's hypocrisy beyond any doubt. "They are not heading for us," Steve continued, studying the trajectories. "They are heading for Dreth Prime, and there is another fleet pursuing them. A much larger fleet." Nathan moved to the display, his scientific curiosity overriding his surprise. "Those are Vorith designs. Thousands of them. It appears that the Vorith have turned on the Council." More data came in over the next hour. The Vorith Collective had spent the past century holding in secret, just like humanity. But where humans had focused on defense and development, the Vorith had focused on conquest. They had assembled an armada larger than anything the galaxy had seen in millennia. And now they were using it. 3 Valkyrie battle groups had already been destroyed. The Morvani had retreated to protect their homeworld. The Dreth were being massacred as their homeworld burned. The Council, for all its age and power and accumulated wisdom, had not seen the threat coming until it was too late. "The Council is requesting emergency assistance from all member species," Steve reported. "They are losing badly." Carla stood very still, watching the destruction play out on the display. Dreth Prime, a world of floating cities and crystal forests, was dying. Billions of lives were being snuffed out while the greatest powers in the galaxy fled for safety. Director Nathan said quietly, "We could help them." "I know. Our fleet could reach Dreth Prime in minutes using the transit network. We could engage the Voroth before they finish their attack. We have the technology, the ships, the training." "I know." The Council mocked us, dismissed us, drove us away. They deserve to face the consequences of their arrogance. Carla turned to face him. "Do the Dreth deserve it? The ordinary people on those burning cities, the children who never sat in a council chamber, the scientists and artists and workers who just wanted to live their lives? Do they deserve to die because their leaders were cruel to us a century ago?" Nathan had no answer. Carla looked back at the display. At the flames consuming a civilization, at the desperate ships trying to evacuate survivors, at the Vorith Armada advancing without mercy. "Open a channel to the World Council," she ordered. "Emergency priority. I believe it is time for humanity to make a choice." The message went out instantly through the communication network that Nathan had built. Across 200 worlds, leaders received it at the same moment. And within the hour, they sent their reply. Humanity had remembered every insult, every dismissal, every act of contempt. But they had also remembered something else. They had remembered who they wanted to be, the battle for Dreth. I was nearly over. High Arbiter Zorvac sat in the council chamber, watching the destruction on massive display screens that filled every wall. The great sphere of crystal and light that had stood for 12,000 years now felt like a tomb. Around him, representatives from hundreds of species wailed and argued and blamed each other for the catastrophe unfolding before their eyes. The Vorith Armada had torn through the Council's defensive, lines like they were made of paper. Ships that had been considered invincible for millennia broke apart under weapons that the Council had never seen before. The Vorith had spent a century preparing for this moment, and the Council had spent that same century believing that nothing could ever threaten them. They had been wrong. "High Arbiter," one of his aides said. Interrupting his dark thoughts, we are receiving a transmission. The signal is unlike anything in our records. It appears to be coming from human space. Zorvax's compound eyes widened. Human space. The gray zone on the maps. The region where a young species was supposed to be slowly dying in isolation. He had not thought about humans in decades. Accept the transmission, he ordered. The main display flickered, and a face appeared. It was a human male, middle-aged by their standards, with calm eyes and a steady expression. He wore a black uniform marked with symbols that Zorvax did not recognize. "Hi, Arbiter Zorvax," the human said. "I am Ambassador Samuel Pierce of the United Earth Government. We have been observing the Vorith advance with great interest." Behind the human, through a transparent wall, Zorvax could see something that made his heart stop. Ships. Thousands of ships. They filled the space behind the ambassador like stars, each one glow. Wing with power that sensors could barely measure. They were beautiful and terrible, designed with curves and angles that no council species had ever imagined. Zorvax struggled to find words. You were supposed to be dying. You were supposed to be alone and weak and forgotten. Samuel Pierce did not smile, but something in his eyes suggested amusement. The council made many assumptions about humanity. Most of them were wrong. What do you want? Zorvax demanded. Why have you contacted us after a century of silence? We are offering you a choice, Samuel said. Our fleet can reach Dreth Prime in approximately 4 minutes using our transit network. We can engage the Vorith and end this war within the hour. Our technology is significantly more advanced than anything either the Vorith or the Council possesses. We can save what remains of the Dreth civilization. Hope flickered in Zorvax's hearts. Then he saw the expression on the human's face, and the hope turned cold. But we will not do so as supplicants, Samuel continued. We will not do so as observers. We will not do so as a primitive species, begging for acceptance. Then what do you want in return? Acknowledgement. The word hung in the air like a judgment. An official declaration broadcast to every species in the galaxy, stating that humanity is equal to any civilization that has ever existed, that we were always worthy of respect, that your treatment of us was wrong. The chamber erupted. Species who had laughed at humanity for 70 years and forgotten about them for 100. More now screamed about blackmail and manipulation. They accused the humans of taking advantage of a crisis, of using suffering to extract political concessions, of proving that they were exactly as primitive and emotional as the Council had always claimed. But on the screens, Dreth Prime continued to burn. Zorvax raised his forelimbs for silence. His mind raced through calculations, weighing pride against survival, tradition against necessity. He looked at the human fleet waiting behind the ambassador, at the desperate messages coming from Dreth survivors, at the Vorith ships closing in for the final assault. You would let the Dreth die to prove a point? He asked finally. Samuel shook his head. No. We have already deployed humanitarian vessels to evacuate as many civilians as possible. They are operating in the combat zone now, rescuing anyone they can reach regardless of species. Your people are being saved as we speak. Whatever you decide. Zorvax blinked in surprise. Then why do you need our declaration? Because we are not doing this for the Dreth, Samuel replied. We are not doing this for the Council. We are doing this for ourselves. For the billions of humans who grew up hearing stories about the day their ancestors were laughed at. For the generations who worked and sacrificed to build what we have become. For everyone who was told that humanity would never matter. He leaned forward slightly, his voice growing intense. If you want the Vorith stopped, if you want your ancient council to survive, if you want to keep your pride and your authority and your 12,000 years of accumulated power, then you will give us what we have always deserved. Not because we need it, not because we cannot survive without it, but because it is right. The silence stretched on. Every eye in the chamber was fixed on Zorvax. The fate of civilizations hung on his next words. He thought about the day humanity had first arrived. Young and hopeful and eager to join the galactic community, he thought about how he had laughed at them, dismissed them, told them they were nothing. He thought about the warnings some of his advisors had given, suggesting that perhaps humanity was different. Perhaps they should be treated with more respect. He had ignored those warnings. He had been wrong. Slowly, painfully, High Arbiter Zorvax bowed his great insectoid head. Humanity, he said, his voice carrying across the chamber and broadcasting to every corner of the galaxy, has always been our equal. We were fools to believe otherwise. We were wrong to dismiss them, wrong to mock them, wrong to drive them away. I speak for the Galactic Council when I say that we regret our treatment of the human species, and we welcome them as full partners in galactic civilization. Samuel Pierce nodded once. Then he turned to someone off-screen and said a single word: "Go." 4 minutes later, the human fleet emerged from transit directly in the path of the Vorith Armada. The battle lasted 47 minutes. Human ships moved through the combat zone like predators, their weapons striking with precision that the Vorath could not match. Human shields absorbed attacks that should have destroyed them. Human tactics adapted in real time, countering every Vorith strategy before it could take effect. When it was over, not a single Vorith warship remained intact. The armada that had threatened to conquer the galaxy was scattered, debris drifting in the void around Dreth Prime. In the aftermath, as rescue vessels pulled survivors from the wreckage and the Dreth wept with gratitude, Ambassador Samuel Pierce addressed the council one final time. 100 years ago, you laughed at us. You called us primitive, emotional, arrogant. You said we would be forgotten within a generation. He paused, looking around the chamber at the representatives who had once mocked his ancestors. We walked away because you gave us no choice. We come back now because we choose to. Not as children seeking approval, but as partners offering friendship. He straightened his uniform, his expression thoughtful. Humanity remembers every slight, every dismissal, every moment of contempt. But we also believe in second chances. We believe that people can change, that civilizations can grow, that the future does not have to repeat the mistakes of the past. His voice softened slightly. The question is not whether we will forgive you. We already have. The question is whether you will learn from what happened here. Whether you will treat the next young species with the respect they deserve. Whether you will build a galaxy where potential is valued more than age, where determination matters more than tradition, and where no one is laughed at for dreaming of something better. The Council voted unanimously to grant humanity full membership with all rights and privileges. But more importantly, they voted to reform their entire system. They created new pathways for young species, new methods of cooperation, new structures based on mutual respect rather than ancient hierarchy. The galaxy changed that day, not just because humanity had returned, but because humanity had shown them a different way to live, a way that valued compassion over convenience, innovation over tradition, and hope over fear. In the years that followed, historians would debate what lesson the galaxy should take from humanity's story. Some said it was about the importance of never underestimating young civilizations. Others said it was about the dangers of arrogance and pride. Still others said it was about the power of patience and determination. But the humans themselves had a simpler explanation. Sometimes they said, walking away is not giving up. Sometimes walking away is the first step toward becoming something greater. Sometimes you have to leave behind everything you thought you wanted in order to find what you truly need. And sometimes, if you wait long enough, the universe comes around to see things your way. Humanity had waited 100 years for that moment. It had been worth it.